Welcome back. All right, so Patrice Bergeron reaches a milestone last night, and I thought, what better time to look at a player who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer? Now, it was, I think, 6 years ago that I discussed, well, he's a maybe in the maybe a Hall of Famer, and now there's no doubt now. The interesting thing with Bergeron is he seems to get better as he gets older. It is absolutely ridiculous. Also ridiculous, he was drafted 45th overall in 2003 by the Boston Bruins. That was a pretty good pick, and he made the team right out of camp that first year. 71 games that first year, 16 goals, 23 assists, 39 points. So it comes out of nowhere, and right away the defensive aspects of his game are obvious. He has some offensive upside too, and he can win faceoffs. In the playoffs, he adds a goal, 3 assists, 4 points in 7 games. He finished 8th in Calder voting. One of the reasons that Calder voting doesn't necessarily tell you who the best player is in a rookie class. 05-06 in 81 games, 31 goals, 42 assists, 73 points. Absolutely ridiculous point totals for Bergeron in his second year. And while Boston wasn't necessarily having the best of times, he absolutely was a bright, shining light. Anytime that Boston was down over his tenure as a player, honestly, he's been one of the silver linings any given season, including 06-07 and 77 games, 22 goals, 48 assists, 70 points. Notice he's not getting Selke votes yet. The Selke stuff would show up later, and that's something that, we've talked about before. We've seen that with, I think, Suzuki and Hischier are two that come to mind, where people will say, well, obviously Suzuki and Hischier have a lot to learn defensively. So did Bergeron. Bergeron didn't come into the league as the best defensive forward. He evolved to become the best defensive forward. 07-08, a season where he only played 10 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. He suffered a major concussion, a grade 3 concussion, on a hit from Randy Jones. Randy Jones did apologize for said hit, and Randy Jones was suspended by the NHL for 2 games for a hit that would put Bergeron out for the rest of the season. So this is where that debate of how long somebody's suspended being tied into the injury comes up, but it's not going to happen. That's, 15 years ago almost, and it's just, well, no, it is 15 years ago now because that would have been October 27th of 2007. So it's the same now as it was then, and they're the same complaints. And so there was some discussion about whether or not Bergeron would be able to come back and be the same Patrice Bergeron. 08-09, he plays 64 games, 8 goals, 31 assists, 39 points. So offensively, he is not the same Patrice Bergeron. In 11 games in the playoffs, he adds 5 assists. But his point totals would start to come back up. Not to the levels they were the first couple of years, but still they start to come back up. 09-10, 73 games, 19 goals, 33 assists, 52 points. In the playoffs, in 13 games, 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points. 2010 playoffs, of course, being the year that Boston had the 3-0 series lead on Philadelphia and lost 4 in a row. 5th in Selke voting that year. So that's where he ends up on the Selke map, right? That's where people start voting for him. 2010-2011, 80 games played. He's back over 20 goals with 22, 35 assists, 57 points. So again, it's a slow climb back up when it comes to his point totals. He is getting better, and in the playoffs, he has a pretty good run. 23 games, 6 goals, 14 assists, 20 points. He was 4th in Selke voting. Oh yeah, and Boston won the Stanley Cup, of course, in 2011. So that's over 11 years ago now. So it's been a while since that took place, and it does feel like this year's Bruins might be deciding this is a good time to go for another one. But the 2010-2011 team wasn't a favorite going into the playoffs. They just worked really hard. And Bergeron was one of the strongest examples of hard work and what that can get you. 2011-2012 in 81 games, 22 goals, 42 assists, 64 points. So again, his point totals are gradually climbing back up. He's almost up to where he was before the concussion. 7 games in the playoffs, 2 assists. He ends up winning the Selke Trophy that year. So this is where the argument comes in of whether or not he's the best defensive forward in the game. And at this point, I don't know that there's much of an argument. So 2012-2013, 42 games played, lockout shortened season and all. Just the 10 goals, 22 assists, 32 points. In the playoffs, Boston goes back to the final. 22 games, 9 goals, 6 assists, 15 points. They lost in the final that year against Chicago. He wins the King Clancy Trophy, and he was 2nd in Selke voting. So he's a Selke winner, then he's a Selke finalist. 2013, 2014, in 80 games, he gets back to 30 goals for the first time since his second year in the NHL. He gets exactly 30 goals to go with 32 assists, 62 points. So one of the best, if not the best defensive forward, check. 30 goal scorer, also a check mark. And the goal scoring has not come at the expense of his defensive play either. In the playoffs, 12 games played, 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points. He wins the Selke. He was 5th in Hart voting. A couple years ago, I heard, I think it was Darren Dreger that said he was surprised that Bergeron had never been anywhere near the Hart Trophy. The closest he got was 5th in voting. It doesn't surprise me because Bergeron doesn't put up those gaudy point totals. He's never been top 10 in scoring in the NHL. Goals, assists, points. He doesn't appear in the top 10. He is just a very reliable player who is, I would argue, very important to Boston, but I understand why he's never gotten serious Hart consideration. 2014-2015, as Boston goes through a bit of an issue on ice and the product drops a bit. 81 games, 23 goals, 32 assists, 55 points. He won the Selke that year and he plays in his first All-Star game. So that's an interesting thing too. His first All-Star game doesn't come until 2015 after he's already won the Selke a couple of times. 2015-2016, while the Bruins are still just outside the playoffs looking in 80 games he has 32 goals, which is a new career high, to go with 36 assists for 68 points. Finished second in Selke voting, and he played in the All-Star game for the second straight year. So this is where, he's really building his legend. 2016-2017, 79 games. His points totals drop off a bit. 21 goals, 32 assists, 53 points. In the playoffs, 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points in 6 games, and he wins the Selke Trophy. So he won the Selke that year because it is the best defensive forward. It shouldn't be tied to points, and yet it feels like very often it is. 2017-2018, only played 64 games that year, 30 goals, 33 assists, 63 points. In the playoffs, in 11 games, he had 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points. He finished third in Selke voting, which didn't really surprise me because he had missed too many games. And it's an odd way to go about it, but I do think that's part of it. I do think that if he played all 82 games, he probably would have won the Selke that year. And I would say the same of 2018-2019, 65 games, 32 goals, 47 assists, 69 points. As he goes above a point per game for the first time in his career, in 15 years after his rookie year. So for Bergeron, it really is a matter of he gets better as he gets older. In the playoffs, of course, Boston went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. 24 games, 9 goals, 8 assists, 17 points. They would lose in that final against St. Louis. Feels like it's so long ago now, doesn't it? Third in the Selke voting that year as well. He did miss 17 games that season. 2019-2020, played 61 games, 31 goals, 25 assists, 56 points. So almost a point per game again. In the playoffs, in 13 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. Finishes second in Selke voting. So he's guaranteed to be top 3 when it comes to Selke voting. 2020-2021, 54 games, 23 goals, 25 assists for 48 points. That, of course, is a 56-game schedule, so only missed 2 games that year. In the playoffs, he adds 4 goals, 5 assists for 9 points in 11 games. He's very reliable in the playoffs as well. Finishes second in Selke voting, wins the Messier Trophy, and that's the year he became Boston's team captain when Zdeno Chara moved on. He would have been captain much sooner, and that's how I got this jersey, because that's the year I got it, for the fact that all the jerseys that have the A on them, well, they were available. 2021-2022, 73 games played with the Bruins last year, 25 goals, 40 assists, 65 points. So still right up around a point per game. In the playoffs, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in 7 games. Wins the Selke again, plays in the All-Star game again. So going into this season, there was some question of whether or not he would play. Not so much whether or not he would play in Boston. I certainly thought, there might be a team that might throw enough money at him. Bergeron go, fine. But he returns to Boston and made that decision on August 8th, or at least that's when he signed the contract. And this season thus far, in 19 games, 9 goals, 9 assists, 18 points. So if he could play every game, he could set a new career high in points. And he's well beyond where most players are done in their prime. he's still going. He's played 1,235 games. Keep in mind that he missed 72 games in 07-08, and he's had seasons where he's missed games as well beyond that. So he could be up to 1,400 games if not for missed ones and lockout shortened seasons and everything. He has 409 goals, which is 96th on the all-time list. 591 assists, which is 98th on the all-time list. And his 1,000 points, that has him at 94th on the all-time list for points. In the playoffs, in 167 games, 49 goals, 78 assists, 127 points. And what really puts his status into basically absolute first ballot, no questions asked category. Olympic gold in 2010 and 2014. World Junior gold in 2005. That was after he got World Championship gold playing for Canada in 2004. World Cup gold in 2016. And Spengler Cup, he won gold in 2012. Keep in mind he won the Stanley Cup in 2011. He's done a lot of winning. And I mean, it is possible that Boston wins another Stanley Cup before he retires. I don't think they do. I'm being honest as a Bruins fan. I think there are enough holes in the roster that a team should probably be able to knock them out in the playoffs. But hey, just being in the hunt, that's good enough for me. And Bergeron is now one of my all-time favorite players. Cliff Ronning is still the number one favorite player for me for all time. But Bergeron might be a pretty steady number 2 at this point on my all-time favorite players list. He's just been absolutely remarkable to watch throughout. And again, he came into the league unheralded, came in as a teenager, played really well, and that continued after the lockout wiped out season of 04-05. That second year was absolutely fantastic. And after the concussion, it might have taken him a while to get the offense back to where it was, but he's done so. And he's part of course, one of the best lines in hockey. He and Marchand being inseparable. Sometimes Pasternak's on that line, sometimes he's not. But Bergeron, while I don't agree with the perfection line as a term, I will say that Bergeron is one player that in all of these years of watching him play for the Bruins, I have never recalled myself thinking or saying, well, that was a stupid play by Bergeron. What was he thinking? Which is odd because I've had that thought about most hockey players. And Bergeron, he is so smart on the ice. He's good at everything he does. And yeah, I think it stands to reason his number gets retired really quickly after he's done. And he ends up in the Hall of Fame pretty quickly after he's done. But as a Bruins fan, I'm a little selfish. I hope he's not done anytime soon. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.